Hello, how's everybody? Hope you're all doing well. I'm going to give just a quick introduction to the two reading things you have on for module six. Basically, looking at fintech a bit on how they disrupt their markets, and a little bit on entrepreneurship going global. These two articles are very interesting. I'm not going to, I mean, you can read them yourself, so I'm not going to, read them for you. But just to say that, in this week's reading, this module's reading, these are really good. The fintech one is important because one of the ways that you might find yourself thinking about an international entrepreneurship effort is in the financial industry, basically making it easier or accommodating the desire for people to make payments, to buy or sell something, or to send somebody money, or to do something that involves the transfer of funds. Fintech stands for financial companies that are technologically oriented. In other words, that use technology to do your financial transaction. Maybe it's a bit overused because a big bank, of course, is a fintech in that regard. But the concept is that these are companies that are not banks, or not normally what you'd expect to find when you think about traditional financial institution, financial activity, but that have come in there and they're using technology to find new ways to make it possible for you to transact business across borders. That's been a gigantic difference over the years. Over recent years, it used to be very difficult to do business across borders, purely from making the payments and the currencies and the linking of systems side, and that's a lot easier these days. But this article is good because it kind of just talks um, about what you might, just to spur your mind. And again, I'm not going to go through this. You'll see it yourself. But you want to, for the fintechs, often take something old and try to find something new there. Often there's a use of how to use your mobile device to make the payments, to make the contacts. There are certain countries around the world where it's more common for people to pay on their phone than it is for them to go through the normal the banks, because the system there is not very trustworthy, for example. So they're using something that's more technologically advanced than we might do here, but forced to because their normal systems are very poor. Um, you also think about the demographics. There are all sorts of new applications that are coming up, and they come up all the time, where you're really trying to find a certain thing that hits a certain demographic, age group, etc., and rings a bell with them, and that's what they use. These have not done as well as, they're incredibly interesting to read about, but they haven't overwhelmed the market yet. I mean, for example, there are apps that when you walk into a mall, it pops up and it says, you were here a couple weeks ago, you went to these stores, and you spent this much on things that you already have in your house, and that limits your ability to reach your financial goals for this vacation you're planning. Those things exist, but we don't tend to use them as much. It's really cool. That would be really good, but it's like, that's is that worth us creating, spending a lot of money? And maybe it will be more, but so far there are many things like that exist. They're very cool sounding, but that have that are not really overwhelmed us yet. But on the other hand, there will be more and more emphasis and information on what defines us and differentiates us as people and as demographics, that can lead you to have an idea on approaching something in a certain way through a fintech. Um, fee structure is a key. A lot of times people, they don't want to pay for anything, and so yet, but some of these things, they cost money. So how do you marry those two? How do you do something that, your whatever you're doing for anybody costs you money? You're linked with whatever end system that makes the payments, etc. for you. How do you charge for that? Sometimes you charge for directly. Sometimes you get a fee from somebody or from some other thing that you're linking with, and sometimes you're trying to build your business and don't charge much. But basically, these things do cost money, and they usually have to be charged somewhere. Um, I think that's the main thing. I think that there are some very interesting things. Like, I think most people want access to the U.S. market, or some other major markets. So along those lines, the fintechs can often, like, say you want to do a wealth management, you want to work in a U.S. stock exchange, and you want to buy and sell U.S. stocks. You're buying the international section of the shares and mutual funds, etc. Now, how do you do that? How can you effectively do that? How do you work that? And people have done a lot in this area, and there are a lot of companies that do provide people from all around the world a way to get into the U.S. And even if sometimes it's prohibited in local countries from doing exactly that, it's that the way it's set up, they transfer that into a offshore vehicle, that app or something that works. There's a lot to be said for that, and a lot of ways there to do that. But anyway, have a look at that article, and I think that you'll come up with some ideas. Now, the other article for this week is one on entrepreneurship goes global. This one's interesting because it's written from a little bit different perspective. It's written from a perspective of someone who thinks that we're basically maybe a little too hesitant and maybe not quite understanding what the world is like out there, and that might hold us back from being aggressive investors or aggressive thinkers in how to expand internationally. And I think that is true. There are a lot, even though a lot of companies do it, we are always hesitant. You always have a concern and maybe even some fear about doing things. So I think this article is really interesting and again, we've talked about this a little bit in some of that before. But basically, there are companies nowadays that start out with a global view. They rather than build a big domestic base and say, okay, now we've got South Florida covered, let's think about Colombia. They think right away, how are we going to do something that I can sell all across Latin America and in Europe right from the start, that like up to 25%, right from the day one, their business is based or considers the opportunity to link clients and products and services across borders. And so a lot of when you're thinking about things, you think, well, that would be my natural inclination, is to be thinking cross-border first. And then for that it goes to some market things. And then you see that on a little bit about rapidly evolving global markets. And it kind of goes back to a little bit, refers to this, the talk on strategic alliances. As when you're thinking overseas, all of a sudden, you have such a great interconnectivity these days where you pretty quickly find someone who might be a good alliance partner that lives in that's their whole business in another country. And it can be all different sizes, from small to really big. But through the internet and digital market, you're able to find these people and get a long ways into the business before you ever meet them. Maybe you will never meet them, and you can do things a lot more than ever before like that. It's a matter of research, a matter of looking into it, and then you get referrals. But there's so much information available these days that you're able to go much, much further than you were in the old days, where you had to really kind of meet someone and hope for the best and trust them. Where there's a lot that can be done these days with through the internet, etc. Communication, transportation goes there. I think that on the success factors, it's interesting to look at that, about the global vision and the collaboration and the cross-cultural differences. And I think anyway, have a look at this article. I think it's a good one. I think it helps you kind of frame your thinking a little bit. Again, like all articles, like everything I say, take it with a grain of salt, mix everything you read and see what makes sense to you. But I think there are a lot of good points there, particularly on just thinking right off the bat, that idea that I've got to do everything here, then step by step overseas, probably isn't the case. And that can do like when people you're thinking of, how do you almost immediately start a business or work for a company that's going to much more quickly than previously considered branch out into overseas operations. All right, I hope those help. I think they're good articles and not too long, and I hope they're interesting to you. All right, thanks a lot.